All right, strap in, everybody. Today we're diving headfirst into one of those cybersecurity pillars, the ones you hear everywhere, least privilege access, LPA. And get this, we're not just hitting the books.
Oh no, we've got a treasure trove for this deep dive.
Exactly. Articles, sure, but also hold on to your hats, a whole stack of videos from a real cybersecurity heavyweight.
Bert Blevins.
You got it.
So, get ready to unlock this vault of LPA knowledge.
It's funny. For all the talk about least privilege access, it's often, oversimplified.
Yeah, I hear you. We get the need to know idea, but in the real world, with IT systems that are, let's face it, crazy complex, how do you actually make LPA work?
Exactly. So instead of getting stuck just defining it, let's jump right into the thick of things. Imagine, right? A company totally dropped the ball on LPA. Now picture this, one single account, maybe even some junior employee who, oops, has way more access than they should, gets compromised.
Oh, that's a scary thought. And boom, you're looking at a massive data breach. And believe me, we've seen this play out in the real world, and the fallout is just devastating.
Okay, point taken. LPA isn't just some theoretical concept. It has real-world teeth.
It's not just about breaches either. Think compliance, GDPR, CCPA. These days, having a solid LPA strategy isn't optional, it's mandatory.
Right, those regulations don't mess around. Hefty fines, penalties, the whole 9 yards. So LPA helps us dodge those bullets.
Precisely. And hold on, there's more. It can actually make your operations smoother.
Oh, really?
Think about it. Well-defined access, everything streamlined, fewer manual tasks, your IT team can focus on the big picture.
So it's not just a security thing, it's an efficiency thing. I like where this is going. But okay, let's get down to brass tacks. How do we actually DO LPA? Is there the standard playbook?
There are common steps, sure, but the how-to really depends on each organization, their own tech landscape. One of the articles we have here lays out a 7-step guide, a good framework to start with.
7 steps. All right, let's hear them. What's our first move?
Assessment. Lay the foundation. You need a full inventory, every system, every application, all your data. Figure out who does what in your organization and really audit those existing access levels.
So like taking stock. Who's got the keys to what, and do they even need them? Sounds like a massive undertaking, especially for a large organization.
It can be, no doubt. But there are tools, tech, that can help. And this is where we can go deeper than just tossing around terms like IAM and MFA.
Okay, so we all know those by now. IAM, MFA.
Right, exactly. But they're not just buzzwords. They're at the heart of a strong LPA plan.
So for those of us already familiar with IAM and MFA, what are some of the more, I guess you could say, advanced ways to use them within LPA?
One thing that often gets missed is how these systems link up with your HR processes. Imagine this. Employee changes roles or leaves the company, and bam, their access rights automatically adjust based on their new position or revoked completely. No more manual cleanup.
Wow, that eliminates a lot of potential for, human error.
Exactly. And with MFA, we need to be thinking bigger than just passwords and tokens. Biometrics, behavioral analysis, risk-based authentication, it's all becoming more common. Integrating that into your LTA extra security without making it a pain to use.
So we're not just talking about basic two-factor anymore. We're talking about systems that are actually smart, adapt to how each user behaves.
You got it. And that leads us right into step 2, defining clear access policies. It's about setting the rules of the game. But, and here's the key, with nuance.
Okay, so what makes for a good LPA policy? What should we be considering?
It's more than just who can access what. Think about context. Does someone need access to sensitive data around the clock or only during specific times? Can they get to it from any device or just a secure company-managed one?
So it's about layering in those extra controls depending on how sensitive the information is and what the user's role is.
Precisely. And that level of detail, while managing it manually, can be a headache. That's where those automation tools, the ones that enforce your policies, become crucial. They take those nuanced rules and make sure they're applied consistently across your entire IT landscape.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork, assessment, those really fine-tuned access policies. Now, how do we actually put LPA into practice?
Now we're getting into the nitty-gritty, the technical controls. This is where we make those policies real, make sure the right people get the right access, and nobody else.
So those familiar acronyms, right? IAM, MFA, ACLs. But for those of us who know the basics, how do we use these tools effectively for LPA, take it to the next level?
Let's go beyond the definitions and look at some advanced strategies. Take IAM, for example. We can go beyond just managing users and roles and implement something called attribute-based access control. ABAC.
ABAC, okay, that's a new one.
Right.
How does that make our LPA stronger?
With ABA, we're not just looking at static roles, we're taking into account dynamic attributes. Things like location, the device they're using, time of day, even the sensitivity level of the data they're trying to access.
So a user might have different levels of access depending on whether they're on a company device at the office or working remotely on their personal laptop. That's pretty smart.
Exactly. It's all about fine-tuning that LPA. Now, let's talk about MFA. We all know it adds an extra layer of security, but finding the right balance in how we implement it can be tricky.
Yeah, you don't want to make it so difficult that people can't get their work done. Where do we draw that line?
One approach that's gaining traction is adaptive MFA. The system actually analyzes things like user behavior, device reputation, location to decide how much authentication is needed.
So for a trusted user on a known device, maybe just a simple push notification is enough. But someone logging in from a new place or doing something unusual, that could trigger more verification steps. It's like MFA that thinks for itself.
Exactly. And don't forget about those access control lists, those ACLs, essential for controlling access to specific files, directories, and network resources. But managing them manually, a real nightmare, especially in a large, complex environment.
How do we even tackle that?
Automation is key. We can use tools to automatically generate and update those ACLs based on the policies we've set up. Even integrate them with our IAM system so everything's controlled from one place.
Okay, so those technical controls are in place, but let's not forget about the human factor. Training, education, that's still important, right?
Absolutely right. Technology alone can't solve everything. We need to build a culture of security awareness. We're not talking about those boring annual compliance trainings either. We need to make security part of everyday conversations.
I like that, weaving it into the company culture. But how do we make that happen?
Simulations, real-world scenarios. Instead of just telling people about phishing attacks, simulate one, see how they react.
That sounds like a fun way to learn. A little healthy paranoia never hurt. Right?
Exactly. And when it comes to training, tailoring the content to different roles is essential. Someone in marketing needs different training than someone in IT.
Right. Everyone needs to understand the security practices that apply to their specific job. So we've covered a lot on the server side of things, but what about the cloud? How does LPA work in that environment?
That's a great question, especially with more and more organizations moving to the cloud. The good news is many of the LPA principles we've talked about, they apply to the cloud too.
So still talking about clear access policies, strong authentication, monitoring everything closely, and that zero trust model.
Exactly. But the cloud brings its own set of challenges. One big difference is the shared responsibility model.
Right. The cloud provider takes care of securing the infrastructure itself, but ultimately the organization is responsible for securing their own data and applications. It's a team effort.
Exactly. So you need to really look at the security controls your cloud provider offers and make sure they fit with your overall LPA strategy.
So don't just blindly trust the cloud provider. Do your homework.
Exactly. And be aware of the different types of cloud services and the security controls specific to each one.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. If you're using, say, a platform as a service offering, PaaS, you'll have less control over the underlying infrastructure compared to using an infrastructure as a service, IaaS. Your LPA strategy needs to adapt.
So knowing the ins and outs of those different cloud service models is crucial for effective LPA.
Absolutely. And here's where those automation and orchestration tools really shine in the cloud. They help you manage access controls and enforce policies across a vast and dynamic environment.
Trying to keep track of everything manually in the cloud would be impossible. So using technology to automate those processes is essential. Now, let's bring in some wisdom from our cybersecurity guru, Bert Blevins. He had some interesting ideas in his videos. What stood out to you?
One thing that really resonated was just-in-time permissions, or JITP, a powerful way to boost security anywhere, but especially in the cloud, where things are always changing.
Oh yeah, I remember that one. Giving users temporary access to resources only when they absolutely need it, like a temporary key to the supply closet.
Exactly. It shrinks that window of opportunity for attackers. Even if credentials are compromised, the potential damage is limited because the access expires quickly.
It's like a self-destruct button for access privileges. I like it.
Another interesting concept Bert talked about was unlimited admin mode. Now, I know that might sound a little counterintuitive.
Yeah, unlimited admin access. Isn't that asking for trouble?
It could be, if not implemented carefully. But Bert explained how Delinea, a leading cybersecurity company, has developed tools that make it possible to give users temporary and very restricted admin privileges, but do it safely.
So it's like giving someone the keys to the kingdom, but with a really short leash and a lot of supervision.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance,
Yeah.
empowering users to do their jobs and keeping everything secure.
Makes sense. Sometimes you need those elevated privileges to get things done, but they should be tightly controlled for a limited time. Now, Bert also had a great video on password rotations in Red Hat Linux. That's something people often forget about.
Absolutely. Password hygiene is fundamental to cybersecurity, especially important for privileged accounts. Bert gave some great tips on how to automate those password rotations and manage the rotated passwords securely.
So we're not talking about just changing your password every 90 days. This is about having robust systems in place that ensure strong passwords and regular rotations without making it a burden for users.
Precisely. And speaking of often overlooked aspects of LPA, what about documentation?
Documentation. Not the most glamorous topic, but definitely essential. We've all been there scrambling to figure out who has access to what when something goes wrong.
Exactly. Thorough documentation is so important for consistency, auditing, compliance, troubleshooting, incident response, you name it.
Like a roadmap for your LPA strategy, tells you where you are, where you're going, how to get there.
That's a great way to put it. And good documentation helps with knowledge transfer. Someone leaves the organization, a new person comes in. You don't want to lose all that valuable information.
Right, you want to make sure things keep running smoothly and you're not starting from scratch every time there's a change. Okay, we've covered so much in this deep dive. Server-side LPA, the cloud, technical controls, training, documentation. What's the one big takeaway you want our listener to walk away with?
LPA is not just a box to check. It's a fundamental shift in how we think about security. It's about moving from that old perimeter-based security to a zero-trust model. We verify every access request, no matter where it comes from.
So assume no one, not even people inside the network, should be trusted automatically.
Exactly. And when you adopt that mindset and put these strategies into action, you significantly strengthen your organization's security posture. You're protecting your valuable data from the constantly evolving threats out there.
We've really gone deep, haven't we? I mean, from the tiny details to these big strategic shifts, it's been a journey.
It has been a deep dive. And it's clear LPA, it's not just another buzzword, it's really changing how we think about cybersecurity at a fundamental level.
Yeah, absolutely. But here's something I've been thinking about as we've been talking. We've covered the how, the steps to take, but what about the why? Why this big push for such a fundamental change?
You're hitting the nail on the head. The digital world, it's changed so much, even just in the last few years. How we work, how we connect, the sheer amount of data. It's all evolving at an insane pace. And with that comes a whole new level of risk.
It's true. Everything's connected these days. Our devices, applications, cloud services, it's all intertwined. And that interconnectedness, well, it makes us more vulnerable, doesn't it? One weak link and the whole system could be at risk.
Exactly. And that's where LPA comes in. It's not just about stopping breaches, it's about damage control. If a breach happens, limiting access to only what's absolutely necessary, well, that contains the damage.
Like those compartments on a ship. One gets breached, but the whole thing doesn't sink. LPA is like building those digital bulkheads.
Perfect analogy. And this ties in perfectly with that zero trust model we talked about. No more implicit trust. We verify every single access request. Every time.
So even inside the network, no one gets a free pass. Everyone's a potential threat until proven otherwise.
Exactly. It might seem a little extreme, but think about the alternative. Data breaches are costly. And not just in money, your reputation takes a hit, customers lose trust.
It's bigger than that too, right? We're talking about protecting sensitive information, intellectual property, even national security in some cases. A data breach can have huge consequences.
Absolutely right. That's why LPA is becoming so crucial across every industry. It's not just an IT thing anymore, it's a business imperative.
Okay, so we've established that LPA is essential. But I think sometimes there's a disconnect between knowing something is important and actually doing it. Any advice for those struggling to get LPA off the ground?
One big mistake is thinking of LPA as a one-time project. It's not something you set and forget. It needs constant attention, monitoring, evaluation. You need to be ready to adjust.
So it's not just checking a box, it's got to become part of the company culture, right?
Precisely. And that means everyone needs to be on board, from the top down. The executives, the managers, everyone down to the frontline employees. Everyone needs to understand why LPA matters and how they contribute to a strong security posture.
Which brings us back to training and education, making cybersecurity part of daily conversations.
Absolutely, and not just lectures and slideshows. Make it engaging. Simulations, gamification, real-world scenarios, these can be really effective.
Make it personal. Help employees understand how what they do impacts security and ultimately their own well-being.
Exactly. Now, another challenge is finding that balance between security and usability.
Right. Too many roadblocks, and you kill productivity. But you can't be too relaxed about security either. How do we find that sweet spot?
It's about getting those access controls right, that level of granularity. You want to restrict it enough to minimize risk, but not so much that it stifles innovation and collaboration.
And that's where technology comes in, right? Tools like the ones we talked about for IAM, MFA, ABAC, they can help automate those granular controls and enforce policies consistently without making things too complicated for the users.
Exactly. Use technology to streamline those processes, makes security just a natural part of the workflow.
So security becomes an enabler, not a roadblock. People can work efficiently and securely.
Precisely. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, here's a final thought I'd like to leave you with. LPA isn't just about technology or policies. It's about building a culture of trust and responsibility.
Where everyone feels empowered to protect data, report potential threats, without being afraid to speak up.
Absolutely. When you reach that level of shared awareness and accountability, you've truly transformed your security posture.
So there you have it, folks. Our deep dive into the world of least privilege access. We've talked about its importance, the challenges, and how to put it into practice. And while it might seem like a lot, the benefits are huge.
Remember, security is a journey, not a destination. And with LPA as your guide, you can navigate the ever-changing world of cyber threats with confidence.
So go out there, embrace the principles of least privilege access, and empower your organization to thrive in this digital age. Stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay secure. Until next time, fellow knowledge seekers.